I've gotten some questions about my kind of interest in realism lately, and it made me think a lot about drawing and kind of my own foundation in drawing, and when I was young studying anatomy and portraiture. And I think the portrait is something that's really easy to kind of misunderstand when you're drawing, so I thought maybe I'd go over a little bit of my thought process in drawing some of these portraits that I'm doing and sketching these faces and sketching them in a particular way that I do. I typically, when I'm drawing, I want to really bring things into an area of almost minimalism. I mean, I don't want to be overbearing with my line work. I want to use the line to define shapes and values. So I'll mix different textures and different things when drawing and when kind of filling in shadows and darker areas, and as well as kind of using the line to define highlights rather than just leaving empty space in certain places. I am using empty space in certain areas, but not all of them. So as I'm working on the preliminary sketch here, I'm just using pencil just to kind of lay out where I want things to be. I wanted this to be a little more representative of the reference that I'm using. And I think using reference is always obviously incredibly helpful, but there's times when you can kind of stretch the reference into a new area and you don't necessarily need it to be as proportional to the reference or as exact. In this scenario, I'm using pencil to really guide where the drawing is going to go, because I want it to be a little closer to the proportions of the reference. I think that's something that's really important to consider when you're drawing, is kind of where your own kind of lines are and where your own restrictions are that you're going to put on your own work, even if it's just a single piece. Because there are ways to exaggerate proportions and where things are going, but you want it to be purposeful and not just done kind of randomly or accidentally. There can be good accidents, happy accidents, I suppose, but it's nice to kind of know in general where things are going. And then little accidents might happen along the way within your own kind of style, or within certain lines that kind of match up in a certain way or contrast each other in a certain way, that can only come from free flowing while you're drawing, kind of really letting it naturally happen. But for the most part, you want to have a guide, and I've kind of been using the pencil line to kind of outline where darker areas are going to be. I'm kind of keeping those things in mind, and that's why when I bring in, now that I'm kind of highlighting the darker values first, just like you would go about it in a painting, I'm using that to really, really create structure. I'm going to kind of keep these darker areas in mind to then create gradients off of. So that the gradient might include cross-hatching. It might just be kind of random strokes, tight, smaller strokes of a thinner pen. It kind of depends on the area, and I like to mix things up in that sense. There's a lot of different types of values and little subtle changes in values in all these areas of the face. And now that I have everything kind of lined up where I want it to be, the eye lines up with the nose correctly and with the lips, and the chin, I think, is in the right place. And I didn't even necessarily erase the original chin line. You can see it's a little bit extended, but once you kind of darken and define the true chin line, then it keeps that sketchy quality. It keeps that kind of loose, almost impressionistic quality, but actually retains and reflects the original source. And I'm kind of using a lot of random lines here. I really love strong lines mixed with very sporadic kind of random lines. I like trying to utilize different angles. I like using sharp angles and then next to kind of rounded, randomized line work and angles and shapes. And that's just how I love mixing those things together. Here I'm using a little bit of cross-hatching just to kind of add some depth to this area where the back of the head is. That in the reference there's like a specific hairstyle that's on the model. I'm not copying that exactly at all. I'm kind of improvising a little bit there, but there is still this depth and gradient of shadows that's taking place, so the cross-hatching really helps there. And even though this isn't realism, it's not, you know, photographic realism or something, I feel like I'm trying to capture the essence of the portrait within this reference that I'm using. It's not necessarily about the person, it's not about their own individual essence, but the essence of the expression. I think that's something that's important to consider when drawing and when painting. Because sometimes you might have a style that is not reflective or showcased, or it's not necessarily defined as realism. If you're wanting to branch out a little bit farther than just doing something that's realistic, and you're trying to find your own style, then you have to be okay with that. It's okay to have something look enough like the reference that you can kind of see it, but you don't have it. It doesn't necessarily have to be exact. It's good to understand how things work. I mean, that being said, you want to be able to kind of think about anatomy and the way that lines interact with each other so that things do kind of make sense. But the rest is kind of up to you. I mean, especially when you're drawing and when I'm drawing, it's that constant balance of, is this going to make sense in this area? Do I leave this area empty? Do I add more gradients? Is more line work going to hurt the specific area of this drawing that I'm working on? Or is it going to help it? Is it going to kind of push this area into a new realm of contrast that's really interesting and visually kind of stimulating in this drawing? And this is just a sketch in my sketchbook, but whatever I'm drawing, whenever I'm drawing, that's kind of what I'm thinking about. Not to a stressful degree, but I think it's important to kind of have a little realm of thought and kind of a little process for every drawing you do, in my opinion. And within that little realm or that little area, there's a lot of fluctuation. There's a lot of things that, you know, you can allow yourself to be casual about it and try to find that flow state, but I haven't been able to kind of identify with the completely free-flowing, anything goes type of sketching. There's like a place for that for sure, but it's usually within a larger picture, you know, within the large picture of what I'm trying to draw or achieve. And there's other times when I'm just specifically doing like doodling or something, but even that is with some intention. You know, I have the intention of experimenting with a certain line or a certain cross-hatching technique next to another one. And then all of those types of techniques will add up to something like this, where I'm using different types of little shapes and little patterns and things that I think enhance a portrait or enhance a piece and bring an aspect of uniqueness to it. Well, thank you for watching, and definitely leave me any questions or comments in the section below, and I'll try to answer them. And I know it's been a while, but thank you all for watching.